Hey everyone, this is Dylan here, and today I'm going to go over the reference range for vitamin D. So generally speaking, the reference range of an analyte is going to be representative, obviously, of healthy people within the population and what their values are. So you're kind of assigning an upper bound, and in the case of vitamin D, that's going to be related to toxicity. As it is fat soluble, you can overdose on it, you can have too much of it, and then you can start having, exhibiting toxic effects of vitamin D. So that's how the upper bound will be determined. And then the lower bound is where there's lots of debate because, the lower bound should be, representative of insufficiency or deficiency of vitamin D, and you should be exhibiting signs of that. So in 2011, the Institute of Medicine convened a committee of experts to look at what this lower bound of vitamin D should be. So if you search up a general AI answer, you're going to see it listing the reference range as 20 to 50 nanograms per milliliter. And that's kind of based on misinformation in respect to the lower bound in regards to what this committee presented in 2011. So I'll have the snippet here, and you can see that they came to the conclusion that when determining this lower bound, an important aspect of it is the effect of calcium absorption. So vitamin D will help with calcium absorption, and they conclude that the bone strengthening benefits of vitamin D plateau when blood levels reached about 12 to 16 nanograms per milliliter. And then based on that, they found that there was no benefits to having levels above 20 nanograms per milliliter. So that was kind of the initial evidence, and unfortunately it was kind of misinterpreted to somehow mean that the lower bound should be 20 nanograms per milliliter. Once that started happening, the leading experts from that committee actually issued a rebuttal saying that 20 nanograms per milliliter was never intended to be the cutoff for an acceptable amount, and that they actually said 12.5 is more appropriate based on looking at all of the evidence. And as a common sense approach, they looked at the fact that 6% of Americans had a value of less than 12.5, which kind of would make sense with the reference range that, majority of your population should be healthy, and then the upper bound would be like a very small amount of people who overdose on it, and the lower bound would be a small amount of people who would be actually deficient, rather than insufficient, which was a term being floated around as well. Everyone kind of saying, oh, you should have more vitamin D. So once that came out, kind of the damage had been done. So if you look at a lot of the reference ranges, if you actually look at the numbers rather than just kind of like the color coding system that these results will have, you'll get a better understanding of how one's vitamin D level actually fits in with the observed evidence of what is normal or healthy. And I think in general it's important because if your reference range is not representative of the sample, and you have something like you need 30 nanograms per milliliter to be healthy, then a lot of people are going to be going around thinking that I'm unhealthy if I have less than that, and they could take compensating steps to kind of account for that. So I think that's damaging because it could lead you down the route of anxiety, just being worried about it. You're taking steps to kind of increase your levels even though they're perfectly fine, whether that's supplements. And also the screening aspect as well. You're having that vitamin D test done because you think you're insufficient because everyone's talking about it, or deficient. And, it's kind of wasted resources, time, and money into going down this whole route in the first place. If, the experts are saying only 6% of people are below the actual cutoff of 12.5. Obviously, there is debate, there's nuance and give and take. But I do think those are some of the, important, effects of a misinterpreted reference range. And there are a couple interesting points were brought up in this Scientific American article. So I'll have the snippet here. is that one of the proponents for a higher reference range, he's a big advocate of supplementation for vitamin D. He'll say you need all these ridiculous amounts per day to be healthy, and he received at least 100,000 from various companies involved in making vitamin D supplements and tests. So I think there's big business behind, as I said, the testing of that unnecessary testing, and that we should just be checking vitamin D levels in high-risk people. So that's what most experts are saying. So unfortunately, there is kind of a over-testing right now of it. Something like 10% of Americans have received a vitamin D test. But the common sense approach is those at highest risk should be tested. And remember, it was about 6.6% are less than 12.5, which is there's evidence for that being a better cutoff point. So those at risk of a true deficiency, people with anorexia or people with malabsorption issues, and so that should be where your resources, time, and money should go, to those who actually need it, rather than people who are kind of see something online and they start to get worried that maybe they're deficient. And another thing I wanted to touch upon is kind of the AI answer. So it seems very easy and straightforward to get an AI answer to your questions. So for reference ranges for vitamin D, it pops up straight away. It actually automatically highlighted that bit in the screenshot there. So it says it very definitively and authoritatively. So I just want to kind of talk about that for a second. I think that's a little bit concerning because all the science behind it is like very nitty-gritty, very nuanced. There's a lot of debate and back and forth. And so kind of if you go into looking at your test results or other people's test results with this kind of clear kind of answer that AI seems to suggest, which is, as we've covered, not quite accurate, I think that can be misleading and potentially harmful if it takes you into the compensatory routes of supplementation, unnecessary supplementation, for example, or further unnecessary testing. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of mention that because it makes it seem like it's so easy and straightforward, but there's a lot behind it. There's a lot of give and take, and a lot of times it is actually just wrong. And it lists here like deficient, insufficient, and all these different terms, which there's a lot of debate about. But the Scientific American article was quite thorough and good, and the experts from that initial committee, in their rebuttal said 12.5 is one of the bounds for vitamin D. They're all, and as a part of that, 16 is a good value. No benefits of having levels above 20, which is very different than saying 20 is your lowest bound, or 19.9 is deficient, as the AI suggests. So just one thing to keep in mind. So yeah, hope you know more about vitamin D testing and reference ranges. And thanks for watching, and see you next time.